Bi-amping is a technique that's been used by bassists for quite a while before we had today's innovation in bass distortion. Here I'm using an orange amp detonator to combine a bass amp and a guitar amp to get some truly raunchy distortion. The orange amp detonator is an ABY pedal. There are many like it on the market. This is just one of the ones that are newer. And what it does is it allows me to take one signal, in my case my bass guitar, and it splits it into two signals. And so I can take one and run it into my bass amp through my pedal board, and I take the other signal and run it into my guitar amp. For the bass amp, I'm running the orange AD200B Mark III, and I'm running that through my pedal board, which I'm going to list the specs of. And for the guitar amp, I'm using a PV6505 Mini with just a noise suppressor in front of it. This really helps tame the monster feedback that you get from a guitar amp like this when you turn the gain up really high. Now, actual bi-amping not only involves combining two amps, but usually it involves using something called a crossover, where you choose a frequency point, something like 200 hertz in this situation, where you say, I want everything underneath that frequency coming out of just the bass amp, and everything above that frequency coming out of just the guitar amp. What I'm doing in this video would be considered probably something like dual amping, because I'm not manipulating the frequencies in any way. Everything is coming out of both amps equally, and they're both set directly at center. Now, at first I thought this was just going to be a fun thing to try, and I was just going to do it once and maybe make a video on it and never do it again. But I was pleasantly surprised by the way that this thing actually sounded with my bass. And I was even more surprised at how well in the mix it sounded. distortion is really, really gritty. It's almost like a fuzz pedal. And the best part of the entire situation is that you get to retain the actual bass tone. You get to retain the bottom end. The problem with bass distortion as a whole, and what has been a problem for a long time, is that as soon as you add distortion or as soon as you add too much gain to a bass guitar, you start to lose bottom end, and then the bass can't do its job. So it might sound really good when it's by itself, or when you're just kind of having a bunch of distortion or a whole bunch of gain and you have maybe like 10 fuzz pedals on and it's like really cool to experiment with. It's cool to hear by itself, but you don't really have any practicality when it comes to an actual song setting, because the bass guitar serves a fundamental purpose in a song. And as soon as you start losing its bottom end and you start losing the body of the bass guitar, it just ends up sounding like a super low-tuned guitar. So then you just have 3 guitars or multiple guitars on the record or in your band, and you don't actually have a bass guitar, and so it's not going to serve any real purpose. Now, in 2020, it might not be necessary to do something like this. This would have been really cool, and bass players have been doing it for a long time in the past, but we've come out with a lot of innovations in bass distortion. Companies like Dark Glass has really hit the nail on the head with what bass guitarists, especially metal bass guitarists, need and want in a bass rig. Even with some really awesome distortion pedals on the market, I do think there's a few advantages to having your bass tone, your clean bass tone, separate from your distorted bass tone and being able to control them completely independently. Basically, having this guitar amp as a distortion pedal for my bass amp just allows it to be a glorified distortion pedal. So I just think of it as being a super awesome distortion pedal that is all tube, that gives me all the controls of a guitar amp that I have to have a cabinet with. Now, something I want to mention in this particular setup is the use of a noise gate. When I turned on the guitar amp, it was really noisy. My bass amp is silent compared to it, so you can hear that thing when I'm playing and it's in between takes or in between chugging when I'm playing, when it's just silent. You can hear the guitar amp. So having a noise suppression unit is almost essential. So what do you guys think? I, for one, was pleasantly surprised with the tone. I would definitely use it for recording. I would use it for covers. I think it's really awesome. I would love to hear what different amps sound like, different guitar amps sound like with my bass rig. But I do think this is a little bit too much for a live setup. I mean, can you imagine having to fight with your band about not only having all your super heavy and super huge, awkwardly shaped bass gear packed into the Ford Focus, but now you also want to have basically a guitar rig, a third guitar rig if you've got a standard 2-guitarist band, and God help you if you have more than that, and just having that fight with them and saying, I just want to be able to have this for maybe, you know, a few distortion songs. I'm sure that's going to go over really well. But for the slight chance that it doesn't, I would probably stick to using this in a recording only situation and only pulling this out live if you guys are famous enough for other people to carry your shit onto the stage, because nobody is helping you for free putting the shit together. Get a distortion pedal, they're gonna say. Get something light, they're gonna say. Get something you can shove into your pants, they're gonna say, because this is bull. they're gonna say. So comment down below about what you guys thought, but also what kind of overdrive and distortion do you use? Because it's modern day. Somebody is always using some sort of overdrive on bass to at least even sit into the mix. I mean, I'm sure people have some crazy stuff out there that they're using, some crazy ideas. Put it all down there in the below area. Do all the follow stuff, the bell stuff. There's a bell, do the bell stuff. And I will catch you guys in the next one.